The Nelson Audio Library presents a classic battle of good and evil with a modern twist. Abaddon by Bob Larson. In this suspenseful sequel to Larson's best-selling novel Dead Air, we again meet Jennifer, now a teenager, and now under the spell of a demonic death metal band. Jennifer's stepfather, together with a policeman and a psychiatrist, desperately work to draw Jennifer back toward the light. Their struggle becomes a warning to Christians everywhere about the dark threat of death metal music to today's teens. Prepare to be caught up in a race against time as you listen to Bob Larson's Abaddon.
It had been trying to claw its way in, but the glass kept it out. For now. As Wes Bryant peeked out the window, he saw it crouched, panting and waiting, its red eyes fixed on him, its massive wings raised to swoop again. The sound of breaking glass awakened Wes, who lay frightened in his bed. The nightmare had haunted him for weeks. He groggily sat up on the edge of the bed and looked for traces of the winged beast, half believing he would see it. He did see an evergreen branch sticking through a window it had broken near the roll-top desk. The wind, Wes murmured to himself. I should have cut those tree limbs last weekend. Wes quickly dressed and headed to the kitchen, where he put a teapot of water on the stove. While he waited, he stepped into the living room. A picture of his stepdaughter Jennifer was sitting next to his and Annette's wedding photo on an end table. Since their marriage 5 years ago, Wes had whispered a private prayer of thanksgiving whenever he saw the wedding picture. The teapot summoned Wes back to the kitchen, where he took a mug from the cabinet. He glanced at the words on the mug. KVCE, 7:50 a.m., the voice of Denver, and realized how far he had come, from being a small-town Indiana talk show host to being general manager of Denver, Colorado's #1 rated station. Things seemed to be going well at KVCE. Listenership and ratings were up this quarter. Talk radio had been his life, but now he spent his time poring over profit and loss statements. He stepped back into the living room, picked up Jennifer's picture, taken at her elementary school graduation. As he looked more closely at the picture, he noticed she looked so different today. That innocent sparkle isn't there anymore. What really bothered Wes were the posters of rock stars Jennifer had plastered on her walls. The singers wore morose scowls, and the names of the bands were a parent's nightmare. Killing Warriors, Cemetery Sounds, Honorable Massacre, and Slow Death. She'll outgrow all of this someday, he thought wishfully. It's just a stage she's going through. Good morning, Dad. Wes looked into Jennifer's bleary-eyed face. Her thin frame seemed fragile, as if she were undernourished, an appearance accentuated by the delicate bathrobe that hung from her shoulders. Having your morning cup of tea, she asked. Already drank it, Wes answered. Can I get you anything? Mom's not up yet. No thanks, Jennifer responded. Andrea will be here in a few minutes to pick me up. See you tonight. Wes didn't like the idea of Jennifer riding to school with Andrea. He unaffectionately referred to Andrea and her friends as the Black Bunch. He couldn't figure out why they always dressed in black. Minutes later, Jennifer rounded the corner. Her attire caught Wes's eye. She was wearing clothing Annette had forbidden. Tight black jeans, a black motorcycle jacket, and a black T-shirt emblazoned across the front with a picture of graveyard coffins being ripped open by hideous monsters whose fangs dripped with blood. Wes wrinkled his brow. Jennifer, you know your mother doesn't want you wearing that, he said, unwilling to let her ignore the house rules. Please change before Andrea gets here. Jennifer stopped with her back to Wes. She turned to face him, an intense evil flashing in her eyes. She clenched her left hand except for the index finger and little finger, which were extended, and jabbed toward Wes with some kind of taunting gesture he hadn't seen before. Suddenly, Jennifer ran out the front door. Wes's knees nearly buckled as he sank into a chair. He was so stunned he didn't think to run after her. His legs still unsteady, he rose from the chair and headed toward the bathroom. He fumbled for the light. As he switched it on, his eyes fixed on the white porcelain sink, now blotched with red stains. Swirls of crimson mingled with the water left standing in the basin. "It's blood!" he exclaimed out loud. Slowly, he raised his head to scrutinize the mirror. "Die, Jennifer," loomed so largely before him, Wes felt as if the words would leap off the mirror. Haltingly, he lifted his wet finger and gently touched the letters. Why would she threaten herself? That makes no sense, Wes wondered. Did she cut herself? Is that where the blood came from? Should I awaken Annette? No. I've got to clean up this blood quickly before she sees it. Wes wiped away the last traces of blood. Jennifer's bedroom, he thought. Maybe I'll find some clues about why this happened. Wes made his way to Jennifer's bedroom, cluttered with stuffed toys and dirty clothes tossed in a haphazard fashion. A bright green Hawaiian lei from the junior high prom, the springtime luau, was draped over one side of the dresser mirror. Jennifer's prize goldfish, Abaddon, floated motionlessly in its aqua prison. Wes leaned toward the aquarium tank and touched the glass, causing Abaddon to flutter its wispy fins and dart about. Wes's gaze moved across the room. He noticed a small silver bowl, a replica of a witch's cauldron with strange designs around the brim and a handle resembling a delicate thread. Wes accidentally tipped it over, spilling a shower of ash on the mauve carpet. Wes knelt down to make sure he had gotten all the ash out of the carpet. He ran his hand under the edge of the bed to retrieve any other spilled objects and found a blue spiral notebook had caught his arm. Looks like a journal or school report folder of some kind. Wes raised himself on one knee and flipped through its pages. Inside the innocent-looking ice-blue cover were pencil drawings of graphic scenes. Knives dripped with blood or were plunged into prone victims. Crudely drawn figures engaged in a variety of perversions, including sexual torture. What is this sick stuff, he wondered. Did Jennifer draw this? He found some pages filled with poetry. He read one of the poems. I'm dirty inside, I'll never be clean. No one knows me, I'm not what I seem. I love the dark and I long for death. True beauty to me is to breathe my last breath. Death is beautiful? Wes said almost silently. He wanted to see more, but there wasn't time. He had to get to work. He bent down to slip the notebook back under the bed. As he did, a torn newspaper clipping, an advertisement for a rock concert, fell out of the notebook. Wes smoothed out the paper and read the jagged print. Night Sacrifice, music from the abyss, Friday, October the 31st, 8 p.m., Old Palace Theater, brought to you by Kazoo, 106.5 FM. Wes knew something had to be done, but what, and when, and how? When I get to the office, Wes thought, if I need to make calls or talk to anyone, I could do it without upsetting Annette. Wes walked to the garage and slid into his sleek black BMW. He headed east on Interstate 70 toward downtown Denver, 20 minutes away, leaving his upscale suburb behind. Night Sacrifice. What does that name mean? Wes questioned. As if on cue, he looked up at a billboard beside the freeway. Thick red lettering that looked like dripping blood screamed its message to the morning commuter traffic. Night Sacrifice comes to Denver October 31st. A slice of the macabre, brought to you by Kazoo. Wes arrived in downtown Denver at the Executive Plaza building. He pulled his car into a space marked Boss, a gag gift from his KVCE staff on his last birthday. Good morning, Boss, Darlene Myers, his secretary said. Here's your mail. Thanks, Wes answered. By the way, have you seen Ross Benson? Ross, the afternoon talk show anchor of KVCE, focused his program on cutting-edge issues facing young people. He's in production studio playing some horrible music. Said it was something he was preparing for today's show, Darlene answered. Ross's back was turned to Wes as he stepped inside the studio. Is there a problem? At 5 feet 8 inches, Ross wasn't physically imposing, but everyone in the station knew he had a big heart that extended beyond the normal duties of a talk show host. His 30-ish receding hairline and off-the-rack casual attire gave him an approachable appearance, an everyman demeanor that evoked friendships with nearly half the staff. Everyone, that is, except KVCE's chief engineer, Hank Overstreet. Even though Hank's job description had nothing to do with programming, he always had a harsh opinion to offer about Ross's show. "I was just curious about something." "Curious about what?" Ross inquired further. "I'll help if I can." "Know anything about a band called Night Sacrifice?" "Night Sacrifice is the death metal band you were listening to." Wes was disgusted. Thoughts of the influence this music had on Jennifer made him want to run, and at the same time, he wanted to double his fist and shove it into something. "Did you say death metal?" Wes asked, and let out a deep breath. "Yeah. It's one of the hottest trends." "Since when is death fashionable?" Wes asked. "Ever since bands like Night Sacrifice started selling this stuff to mixed-up kids," Ross answered. "The worst part is you never know if these guys really mean all the death and doom stuff they sing about." Wes desperately wanted to say something about what had happened that morning, but couldn't bring himself to do it. "Why would a teenager listen to this?" he asked instead, doing his best to mask his fears for Jennifer. Wes regrouped his thoughts and went on. "What's the angle on the show this afternoon?" "The message of death metal music. Today we're taking calls from kids who want to defend it." "One more thing, Ross," Wes said. "Suppose a kid calls this afternoon and he really takes these lyrics seriously. If he's suicidal, what are you going to do?" Ross said confidently, "We'll hook him up with a suicide crisis counselor." Wes relaxed slightly. It was good to know Ross was there in case Wes needed some help. It also occurred to him that there was someone else who might be able to help. Mark Reynolds, the husband of his daughter Misha, from Wes's first marriage. Mark was a cop who dealt with the ugly side of life, including teenagers in trouble with the law. Between Ross, Mark, and me, we'll find out what's tormenting Jennifer. Get to her before it's too late. "You sure are interested in this stuff? Want to take that file with you?" Ross said, pointing to the manila folder lying on the counter. "It's got everything in it you ever wanted to know about death metal music, and a lot you probably don't want to know." "Sure," Wes said. "I'll glance at it and have it back to you by showtime." Wes opened the door and started to walk toward his office. Just before he got beyond earshot, Ross poked his head out the door and called after him. "Wes, I forgot to tell you the most important thing. Night Sacrifice's lead singer will be here live in the studio today. His name is Clint Blade." Wes walked into his office and tossed the Night Sacrifice file on the desk in front of him. He opened Ross's file on Night Sacrifice. The title of a teenage fan magazine entitled Savage blared Clint Blade's creed. "He'll sacrifice anything for fame, the ultimate rock rebel." Wes flipped open the magazine to the 11x17 centerfold, which featured Night Sacrifice engulfed in pseudo-flames. Captions below the photograph identified each band member. They all assumed menacing gazes, except for Clint Blade, whose back was to the camera. In the foreground, hideous monsters with pitchforks dismembered clergymen. Red letters splashed across the top of the poster and said, "Destroy the liars." Darlene stood in the doorway. "Anything else I can do for you?" "Yes," Wes answered. "Get Misha's husband, Mark, on the phone." As Wes waited for Darlene to get Mark on the line, he sorted through the pages of Savage to the article about Clint Blade and Night Sacrifice. The article focused on Clint Blade's notorious background. Disgusted, Wes started to close the magazine pages when he read the words, "A Savage reporter questioned Blade about accusations of rape and indecent exposure. Blade replied, 'I'm a little crazy when I'm stoned, but growing up in the rural Midwest, a guy's got to do something to fight the boredom.'" Darlene's voice on the intercom interrupted him. "They're getting Mark on the line now." "Mark, It's Wes. Is there any way you could come by my house for a few minutes? I can be there in 30 minutes. I knew I could count on you. I'll leave KVCE now, Wes responded. You don't know how much this means to me. Wes grabbed the night's sacrifice file, throwing it into his briefcase. I'm going to work at home for a little while, he said to Darlene as he walked by her door. I'll be back in time for the show this afternoon. Tell Ross I'll sit in on the show. Wes gunned his car out of the parking lot and headed west toward the mountains. As Wes wound his way homeward down Sunset Gulch Drive, he flipped open his briefcase, pulling out the night's sacrifice file. With one hand on the steering wheel and the other busily flipping through photocopies of news articles, Wes did his best to concentrate on where he was going. Suddenly, he slammed on his brakes and lowered his speed to a crawl as he caught a glimpse of an article from an arts and entertainment tabloid. He picked up the article and looked more closely. Sure enough, he recognized it. One frenzied teenager, pictured at the foot of the stage during a night sacrifice concert, had thrust his arm into the air with his index and little fingers extended. The caption under the picture read, "A night sacrifice fan signals his devotion as Clint Blade sings, 'See the abyss where fires always burn, understand lessons the ancient ones learned. Hail, Abaddon.'" Abaddon, Wes thought, recognizing the word. That's more than just a strange name for a goldfish. He slowly rounded the corner of the main road and headed up his driveway. "Mark, thanks for hurrying over here," Wes said as he shook the uniformed police officer's hand. Then he turned to Annette. "I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to talk to you before Mark arrived." "I'll explain everything," Wes added as Annette motioned for both of them to sit down. Wes searched for the right words. "Jennifer and I had a confrontation this morning." He went on to describe Jennifer's dress and language. "She ran out of the house before I could say anything." "I'm sorry, Wes," Annette said. "I've seen her get pretty defiant, but she's never used that kind of language on me." "That's not all," Wes said. "When she left, I went to the bathroom and found something written in blood on the mirror," he blurted out. "It didn't make any sense. I'm still not sure who wrote it. Maybe Jennifer, maybe not. It said, 'Die, Jennifer.'" Annette stared at Wes. She grabbed the sides of her face and shook her head. Wes rushed to her and threw his arms around her. Annette began sobbing. "Why would Jennifer want to kill herself? We love her so much. She knows that. I haven't been a perfect mother, but I've tried my best." Annette wiped away tears. "Oh, Wes, I thought this kind of thing was in the past, back in Clarion, Indiana. When we came to Denver, we were so excited about starting a new life here. Now it's blood and death all over again. I don't know if I can take it, Wes." Wes looked at Mark. "I'm not sure whether Jennifer tried to kill herself or if someone else is threatening her. I checked her bedroom. The window was left open." "May I look in there myself?" Mark asked. "Later we can bring in a fingerprint team and do a full investigation." Wes showed Mark to Jennifer's bedroom. "That's the window over there. It was just cracked open a little. And something else. I found a notebook with strange things in it under the edge of the bed." Wes knelt alongside the bed and retrieved the blue spiral. He handed it to Mark, who thumbed through the notebook. Mark nodded his head slightly and muttered under his breath. "You don't seem shocked by what you're reading," Wes said. "I'd be freaked out if I saw a teenager drawing stuff like that, especially a family member." Mark looked down at him. "Wes, this doesn't come as a shock to me because I've seen this sort of thing before. It's called a Book of Shadows. Kids who get into self-styled cult activity use it to express their feelings and to keep track of the rituals they've done. Sometimes they write in their own blood." Mark pulled his thumb across the pages and watched them rapidly fan by one. "There are at least 20 pages of poetry here, and they're all about death. But more than one person wrote them, because the handwriting keeps changing. Let me read you a couple of lines. 'Down to the graveyard. Night filled with dread. Awaken the masters. and call forth the dead. There's stuff here that veterans on the Vice Squad wouldn't know about, Mark said seriously. The only reason I do is because we've confiscated several books like this from crime scenes. What time does Jennifer get home from school? Mark asked. It depends on the day. Let's see, this is Wednesday. She'll arrive about 2:30 or 3 this afternoon. If you give me permission to take this notebook, I'll have enough time to run it over to the station and make a copy. We can put it back where we found it, and Jennifer won't suspect anything. You're going to spy on Jennifer instead of confronting her right away? Mark mulled the question over in his mind. Wes, I'm a cop, and I have to think like one. I have certain legal responsibilities. This could be linked to some current case under investigation. Mark threw his shoulders back slightly and retucked his shirt under his broad belt. He moved to the window. He leaned forward on his tiptoes and scrutinized the entire casing. What's this? He said, picking up the small cauldron. Beats me, Wes answered. I was going to ask you. Mark drew the small cauldron to his nose and moved it back and forth under his nostrils. He set the cauldron back on the sill and reached into his leather belt pouch for a small plastic bag. He slowly tipped the cauldron into the bag to collect a minute quantity of the ash. Then he carefully removed one of the splinters from the bowl. He put the cauldron back on the sill, folded the bag, and slipped it inside his starched shirt pocket. I wish I hadn't found this, but I'm taking this ash right back to the lab. I think I know what it is. If I'm right, Jennifer is in trouble. As Wes stepped through KVCE's front door, he was surprised to see how late it was, 1:46, time to get himself to Studio A. He raced down the hall past Darlene's open door. I'm going to sit in on Ross's show today. Should be interesting, Darlene said. Wes looked at her curiously. You know about Clint Blade? I didn't think you listened to Ross's show. I don't, Darlene responded as she sat down in the chair opposite Wes's huge desk. But after I heard Ross in production this morning, I asked what was going on. My son Troy is a big fan of that death metal stuff, and he thinks Clint Blade is cool. Darlene went on. Blade's been a bad influence. I bought Troy a brand-new pair of jeans last week, she explained, and he took a pair of scissors and cut gashes in them to get what's called the thrash look. Also, Troy worked the whole weekend at a car wash just to get the money to buy Night Sacrifice's latest double CD set. He spent $30 for that garbage. Darlene glanced at the brass pendulum of Wes's antique wall clock. Ross's show starts in 5 minutes. I'll be listening on my office monitor. I sure hope Ross nails that guy to the wall. Darlene picked up some memos Wes had answered earlier and walked out. Wes stalked the perimeters of his office, restlessly counting down the minutes before he met Clint Blade. The office seemed a little too warm, so he cracked the window to let in some fresh air. Leaning out the window, he noticed that a long black limousine had parked next to the building's front entrance. An unruly crowd clamored around the sleek automobile, hoping for a glimpse of Clint Blade. As Wes started to draw his head back inside, he saw a sporty black car pull up directly behind the limousine. That's Andrea's car. Wes recognized the car belonging to Jennifer's friend. The doors opened, and one by one several female occupants filed out. He strained his eyes to see the last occupant of Andrea's car enter the limousine, the small figure of a young blonde-haired girl. Jennifer! Wes stumbled back from the window and stormed out of the office, his thoughts scattered. I have to get control of myself, he thought as he reached the soundproof door of Studio A. Clint Blade already has enough control in the Bryant household. I was wondering if you'd make it, Ross said as Wes stepped inside. Are you sure you don't want to take over the reins? You look pretty psyched up. It's tempting, Wes said as he glanced around the room, but I'll just watch from that chair in the corner. I've got earphones set up for both you and Clint Blade, Ross explained. Clint Blade will be here any minute, Ross said to Wes. Someone just called from the cellular phone in his limousine and assured me he was on his way. Guest or no guest, I'm starting the show. You can never tell when he might come strolling in." The door to Studio A slowly opened. A tall figure, dressed head to toe in black and wearing opaque mirrored sunglasses, stepped inside. He ignored Wes and sauntered to the console where Ross was seated. He slapped the top of the console with his open palm, causing Ross to jump in his chair. Expressionless, without extending a hand of greeting, he tilted the sunglasses lower on the bridge of his nose and peered down at Ross. With a deep-throated voice, he said slowly, "Get this show on the road. I'm Clint Blade." "Sit over there behind the guest microphone," Ross said, unable to hide his sense of uneasiness. "It's 30 seconds to airtime." Blade was just about what Wes had expected. His lanky 6-foot frame was covered in black. He wore lizard-skin boots. Blade's top-grade calf-leather pants stretched tightly across his thighs. Underneath his motorcycle jacket was a T-shirt with artwork Wes couldn't see clearly. His swarthy complexion and 2 days' growth of beard accentuated his demeanor. He folded his arms across his chest and tilted his chin down. Blade's nonchalance so unsettled Ross, the talk show host fidgeted in his chair as if he were a novice doing his first interview. Maybe I shouldn't have turned down Ross's invitation to do the show today, Wes thought. This guy needs someone who knows how to call his bluff. "Okay, audience," Ross said as he hit the yellow on button of Channel 1 and opened his microphone to the KVCE audience. "KZoo may have their billboard, but KVCE has the real thing. Live in my studio today, Clint Blade, lead singer and founder of Night Sacrifice. He's doing a pre-concert promotional tour, and if you want to talk to him, call now." "Our first caller is Christine," Ross said. "What do you want to ask Mr. Blade?" "Clint, how did you get started playing in a band? Was it something you always wanted to do? Why did you pick death metal? Are the guys you play with now the ones you originally started out with?" "Honey, I got into music because it was the best way to bag babes. You know what I mean," he chuckled darkly. "Then I found out that death metal songs let me say the things I always believed in. What a rotten world we live in. How the adults have screwed things up. The beauty of evil and the glory of death. I'm a preacher, baby. And my gospel is the hopelessness of life. I'm evil," Blade said, drawing out the word sarcastically. "I admit it. I'm glad to be bad. But we can talk more about that later, baby. Catch you after the show." Blade pushed the microphone away, leaned back in the chair, and swung his feet back up on the console. Ross was surprised by Blade's blatant sexual solicitation and his unapologetic endorsement of death and evil. "Line 2 is next, and it's Patty in Woodlake. Your question, Patty," Ross asked. "Clint," Patty said, "can I come backstage with Christine? I'm just 15, but the guys say I'm big for my age, if you know what I mean, Clint. Please, can I? I promise I won't disappoint you." Blade took a deep breath and said, "Sure, baby. You can come backstage with Christine. The more the merrier." "Blade, I think we've had enough of your cutesy comments." Ross fumbled through some papers. He was shaken, and Wes knew it. From here on, the show would probably digress into a Night Sacrifice groupie fest, with Ross Benson merely processing callers. Wes knew it was time to exercise his executive authority. He stood to his feet and walked in Blade's direction. "Blade," Wes said, "if you're going to do the rest of the show, I'm taking over." Blade folded his arms across his chest. "I'd welcome the opportunity to talk with you. I've waited for this a long time. And so has Abaddon." This is Wes Bryant, General Manager of KVCE. I'm going to pinch hit the rest of the hour for Ross Benson. My in-studio guest is Clint Blade, lead singer for the death metal band Night Sacrifice. Normally we take callers during this segment, but I'm going to change the format for the next few minutes. I've got some questions of my own to ask Clint Blade, so sit back and get ready for a one-on-one to find out who Clint Blade really is and what his music is all about. You say you believe what you sing about. Let's get more specific, Mr. Blade. Rape, murder, even sex with corpses. It's all included in your songs. Do you believe in these things? Blade inched forward in his chair. Let's just say belief is different from action. Rape? Who's to say whether or not she really wanted it? Murder? I wouldn't, but if someone else does, who am I to judge? A devilish sneer crossed his face. Sex with corpses? Necrophilia has been practiced throughout history. What's your problem, Bryant? They're dead, so consent isn't an issue. Wes's mind jumped back to the blood-stained mirror that morning. If one of your fans attempted suicide because of lyrics you wrote, would that bother you? Blade reached up with his left index finger and pushed his sunglasses up on the bridge of his nose to adjust them. I'm not responsible for what someone does who hears my lyrics. If a kid is already over the edge, that's the fault of his parents. A stillness pervaded the studio. Wes wasn't certain whether or not his gamble had paid off. Had he given Blade enough rope to hang himself so his audience could see his malevolent intentions, or had he allowed Blade a platform to lure more followers into his diabolical trap? A sudden sharp sound above Wes's head caused him to jerk back and look straight upward. He spotted a TV monitor that was suspended from the ceiling by brackets secured with 4 bolts. One of them had snapped loose. Apparently the weight of the monitor was still held by the 3 other bolts. Wes knew that if one more bolt had come loose, the monitor would have crashed down on his head. Wes punched the direct line to Darlene's office. Get Hank in here immediately, he said, referring to KVCE's chief engineer, Hank Overstreet. We've got a problem with one of the brackets on a TV monitor, and I want him to check it out. Wes leaned back in his chair and kept his eye on the teetering monitor until the door to Studio A opened and Overstreet stepped inside. Overstreet grabbed the extra guest chair, stood on it to reach the ceiling, and pulled a wrench out of the tool pocket that hung from his belt. I can't do anything with it now, he said. His eyes darted in Blade's direction. The threads are stripped. Funny thing, I checked these out at least once a month and was in here yesterday to make sure everything was okay. Don't worry, boss. The other 3 bolts are secure. I'll come in right after the show and rethread the hole for a new bolt. Hope it doesn't scare you, he said as he stepped off the chair and walked out the door. Wes checked his log to see when the next commercial break would be and what spots he'd need to get ready. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Blade take off his motorcycle jacket and hang it over the back of the chair. When he turned around, Wes got his first full view of Blade's T-shirt. He recognized the artist's work. He'd seen it before on Jennifer's forbidden clothing. Blade's T-shirt was equally grotesque, but more intriguing. It was a strange creature, with the body of a dog, the talons of an eagle, and the wings of a bird. Its head was a hideous human skull topped with goat's horns. Underneath it was the caption, Abaddon. Abaddon. Here's that word again. Am I dealing with something supernatural, Wes thought? I hope this creature is just hype. Blade noticed where Wes's eyes had settled and ran his hand down the front of his T-shirt as he sat back down in his guest chair. As the show resumed, Wes said, I think your fans deserve to know a lot more about you. Blade licked his lips and answered, Okay, I'll talk about my personal life. What's important is my music, and what I say through my music. My purpose in life is to be a channel for the ancient ones. They're not of this world, but their wisdom flows through those who seek them, Blade said as his expression went blank. Once the subject turned to the ancient ones, Blade's body language became taut. Wes could tell this was a matter of deadly significance to him. Do you mean these ancient ones are aliens from another planet? No, Blade said without thinking. They're all around us. And if we invite them in, they will enter our bodies. Wes wasn't certain whether Blade was pitching some hocus-pocus line as a distraction, or if he believed the ancient ones were spirit beings of some kind. "Where are they now?" Wes inquired. Blade lowered his head and simultaneously lifted his right hand to his face as if to adjust his sunglasses again. Then in one swift motion he ripped the sunglasses from his face. "The ancient ones greet you," Blade said as he looked straight at Wes, his eyes like daggers turned outward. "What about your fans?" Wes asked. "Do they understand these ancient ones?" Wes closed his eyes for a moment while Blade answered. "Some do, some don't. Those who don't are of no concern to me. Those who do welcome the return of Abaddon," Blade said. Wes switched his microphone on and announced, "Thanks for listening. We're all out of time for today. Sitting in for Ross Benson, this is Wes Bryant." Blade turned deliberately toward Wes and slipped his left hand inside the pocket of his motorcycle jacket. "I'll be here next Wednesday to do your show again, if you'll be there on October 31st, he said, tossing an envelope on the console. He walked out the door. Wes picked up the envelope and ran his index finger under the edge of the partially sealed flap. Inside, he found 2 front-row tickets. Night Sacrifice in concert, Friday, October 31, Old Palace Theater, 8 p.m. Wes bolted to his office. He dashed to the window and looked out just in time to see Clint Blade step from the building's front entrance to his waiting limousine. Blade nodded at the chauffeur and crawled inside, hand in hand, with Jennifer. Wes closed the window blinds. He wanted to be alone to sort out what had happened in the studio, but his solitude was soon interrupted by Darlene. "Mark Reynolds is on the line." "I'll take it," Wes told her. "What's on your mind, Mark?" Wes asked. "Wes, we need to talk." Mark's voice sounded tense. "I have the results of the lab tests. The splinters we found inside that little bowl in Jennifer's room are from human bones, and the ash is the remains of a charred human corpse. This is a police matter, and I've got to question Jennifer." "Could I talk with her this evening?" Mark asked. "I'm headed home right now. I'll call you later after I've talked to Annette." Wes hung up the phone and grabbed his briefcase and headed down the hallway. "Darlene," he called out as he passed by her office, "do you have any idea where Clint Blade is staying?" Darlene asked, "You're not thinking of driving by Blade's hotel on your way home, are you? That guy's dangerous." "7 minutes later, Wes pulled up in front of the Mile High Hotel. A tuxedo-clad doorman approached Wes's car as he turned into the long, curved driveway. "I'll only be 10 or 15 minutes. Can I park it along the curbside?" Wes asked, pressing a bill into the doorman's hand. The attendant nodded and moved on to the next car. Wes made his way into the main lobby. "May I help you?" Wes turned to see a bellhop, a slightly built young man in his late teens, looking the part of an all-American boy trying to do his best on his first job. After he glanced around the open area to spot any wondering groupies or fan magazine photographers, Wes said, "I was supposed to meet someone here for a party. He's with a record company and is hosting someone in the entertainment business." "I think I know what you're looking for," whispered the bellhop. "Clint Blade, the rock star, is throwing a bash on the golden members-only level. No one but hotel management is supposed to know about it, but since you're invited, I can't see any harm in telling you." Wes reached in his pocket, pulled out a $5 bill, and slid it into the bellhop's front chest pocket. A grin crossed the bellhop's face. "Take the elevator with the brass doors marked Golden Members Only and punch in the code 1679 on the pad inside the door," he explained. "If you don't mind, I get off work in 30 minutes. Could you please ask Mr. Blade if I could stop by and get his autograph?" "Sure, you've been a big help. What's your name?" Randy Ingram, sir. Wow, you don't know how much this means to me. Clint Blade is my favorite singer. Wes stepped on the elevator and punched in 1679. Floor 16, the electronic elevator voice said. Wes stepped out of the elevator and looked both ways. A series of double doors lined the hallway. Wes walked to the entrance of the double doors. He heard the sound of a haunting flute melody. The smell of marijuana and incense assaulted his nostrils as he peered inside the darkened room. He noticed the faint outline of bodies as they swayed rhythmically like snakes responding to a charmer's flute. Then above the lilting refrain he heard a single voice intoning, "Come forth to join us, ancient ones."
This concludes this side. Please fast forward the cassette to the end and turn the tape over for the continuation of the program.